What's going on, guys? This is Oliver, formerly from Response AI, now from a few different tools like getseer.com and trycomb.com. Today, I actually wanted to talk about why you're afraid of doing the work and how to start anyway. So in essence, really, this is just going to be about my journey from 0 to 500 plus customers for my SaaS, and then an exit, and how on the way up, there were hundreds of obstacles mentally, psychologically, physically, whatever it may be, that stopped me from doing work that I needed to do. And nowadays I get work done at the speed of light, and it's just because of a few simple psychological tricks that I've implemented. And this is what is distilled into this video. So there's a silent epidemic, guys, of paralysis in this sort of like age that we're in at the minute because of TikTok and your phones and stuff like that, right? So access to knowledge is unprecedented right now. So there is absolutely, guys, no time in history where you had more access to information. But you see how 100 years ago, people might have gotten more done because the limited information meant that they would just get started sooner. So people would start their lumber mills or their railway companies, whatever, and make billions of dollars because the information was limited. And when you have limited information, you may as well just start, right? With this generation, you've actually got way too much information. And so we're plagued by something called paralysis by over preparation, right? So this is kind of the fear of starting, which is comprised of two demons, right? So two big monsters, the fear of insufficient information and the fear of imperfection. So both of these are very real. And here's why it's happening and how to break free with insights from the last sort of 2 to 3 years of my life building startups, right? So the digital age, there's a myth of enough information, right? So the digital age has turned learning into an infinite scroll, right? So essentially Harvard did a sort of a study, and they found that information overload, so when you are given too much info or context on something, it triggers a sort of anxiety inside the amygdala, I think it's called, whatever. And effectively, this causes anxiety, and then it causes inaction because people who are anxious about something don't act, right? This is a perverse sort of feedback loop that destroys you as a person, because the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know, right? And people are stuck in this purgatory, right? They're always learning stuff and they're never actually doing them, right? There's like a dumb thing in coding, which is when a new coder, so someone who's learning software development, they get stuck in this sort of ridiculous loop where they know loads about code, but they never actually build anything. If you told them to sit down and build something, even the simplest to-do list app or the simplest iOS app, whatever it may be, they just go blank. They're paralyzed because they don't know if they know enough to build an app, which is why they just go back to the dopamine-inducing learning of watching 8-hour tutorials on YouTube and shit like that, right? So in other words, they're morons. Now, this is a philosophical insight. So Jean-Paul Sartre argued that existence precedes essence, right? So I know that sounds a bit cheesy, but you define yourself, guys, through action as opposed to preparation, right? So no amount of preparation is going to make you any money. No amount of preparation is going to get you the relationship you want. No amount of preparation is going to get you the new job or the new business, whatever it may be. You know loads of stuff, but you don't do anything, right? And that makes you a moron, right? So there's a Taoist principle of Wu Wei, which is effortless action, right? So it talks about acting quickly and with the flow as opposed to sitting back and just sort of like overanalyzing. If you don't do stuff, you are a loser by default. Everyone I know who is winning it's because they're doing stuff. Everyone you know who is winning, it's because they are doing stuff, guys. You just have to start doing stuff. And if you are overanalyzing the situation and you think, I can't build this app because I don't know enough, I can't talk to that person because I don't know enough, I can't get that job because I don't know enough, you are just creating this cage that you will never break out of because you are waiting for new information. That new information is never going to come. And truthfully, the best game that you get and the best info and the best insider takes is actually from just doing it. So you can read about cold calling you can read 15 books on cold calling, like in predictable revenue, fanatical prospecting, all of these massive books. You could watch all of, Wolf of Wall Street's courses and stuff like that, the Jordan Belfort. all of this stuff, but you never actually learn more than when you just pick up the phone and go, oh, this is Oliver and I want to sell you something, right? Like you'll never learn as much as when you actually start doing the thing, right? Now, a modern example is Elon Musk, right? So like him or dislike him, whatever, he's an interesting character. His mantra is start with the physics and work backwards. So this was obviously in context in relation to his aerospace sort of endeavors with no formal training. And he relied on experimentation as opposed to like exhaustive study. So if this dude just sat back and was just like, oh, I need to learn more before I start building damn rockets, right? He's not going to achieve anything. So he didn't need to do a sort of 10-year thesis or any of it or some university degree specifically on this, that, or the other. He just started these things, right? And I don't know that much about his background. I just know that he's a doer, you know, he like does stuff. Now, the fix for this, guys, is to adopt what's called the lean startup mindset by a guy who wrote a book called Lean Startup called Eric Rice, right? So you begin with a minimum viable action. So in other words, you iterate based on real world feedback from something that's very, very small, right? So you can prioritize all this stuff with Notion and Trello and all that kind of thing. Don't overcompensate or get obsessed with these tools that help you to do things, right? Spending 6 hours like creating a Notion page is for losers, right? You need to be coding or working or writing or building or calling people or emailing people or making videos on YouTube, whatever it may be. And all of this can be done from Apple Notes. Now, when it comes to a minimum viable action, let's assume that the minimum viable action is just releasing a YouTube video, right? As you can see, guys, if you guys are still watching, this is not a lot of effort to put together creatively these videos. It takes a lot of my brain, but I don't have to do any of these wild animations. I put a Canva presentation together and I start talking to the screen, right? And that is my minimum viable action. You don't have to think about how many subscribers you're going to get. You don't have to think about how many people are going to pay for your tool. If your minimum viable action for building a software product is getting the landing page up and just telling a few people about it, so be it. A lot of people are crippled by the extent of, you know, like the journey ahead. Like, oh, how much am I going to have to do? To be honest, if you knew how much work you'd have to do, truly, you'd quit today. Because it is so much work. However, we're not in the business of doing that. We're in the business of making fucking money, right? So, the fear of failure. Now, procrastination isn't laziness, guys. It's actually a survival mechanism. So our brains, basically, they evolved to avoid risk that could lead to what, you know, social exclusion, right? People thinking we're a moron, right? So if you are humiliated, you know, 15,000 years ago and you're part of some tribe in cloth covering your genitals and shit, right? Like, you don't want to be doing stuff that's wrong. You don't want to mess up like a hunt. You don't want to, lose sight of something massive, some prey or something like that. People will think you're a moron, right? And that's where the laziness comes from, is in the modern world, this wiring backfires on us. And basically, there was a study in the Nature Neuroscience publication that revealed that anticipatory anxiety, which is fear of what could happen, activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, right? So if you're building an app, and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, like, if you have that fear of it not working, it's going to actually physically pain you and it's going to stress you out, right? You need to just effectively act without thinking too much. I know it sounds wild, but the way that you do this is you simply create a to-do list on Apple Notes and you continue to tick off things that you need to do, right? The minute you start analyzing it, oh, is this going to work? Right, it's just not going to happen. You are going to stack up that anticipatory anxiety and then you're going to start feeling that pain. You just need to get moving, and then momentum produces the information that you actually needed all along. So when you're like, oh, I need to read this another article, I need to watch this next like Alex Hormozzi video before I start cold emailing people, right? That's just garbage, man. Like, you are never gonna find. I promise you, the information that you need to start is not in that next video by Alex Hormozzi or Sam Evans or you know, like I don't know any of these guys, right? It's not on the next podcast. It's not on the next whatever. It is in you just starting. That information that you get from those guys is amazing. It's awesome information from guys who have done it. But the amount of information needed to start is very limited. It's just as simple as writing down, I'm going to start, and then doing it, right? You don't need some 85-minute masterclass on how to run like a super business when you haven't even sent your first damn cold email or haven't even called your first business, whatever. You just need to start. Now, the psychological insight and an evolutionary hangover, effectively. So Tim Urban's panic monster metaphor from Wait But Why illustrates how procrastination is actually a battle between the limbic system, which is our emotional brain, and the prefrontal cortex, which is our rational brain. So emotional is like all the thoughts you have and like the feelings, and then the prefrontal is like the actual like, okay, what needs to be done at like the primal level, right? Now, when faced with uncertainty, the limbic system defaults to avoidance. So in other words, the reason you get in your like loser state of like, oh, I don't want to do any work, I'm too scared to do the work, is because you're scared from the get-go, and then that causes you to not work. It's absolutely crazy, guys. It's absolutely crazy. It's pathetic, but it's valid, right? So everyone goes through it. A modern example is that J.K. Rowling, her manuscript was rejected 12 times, and she essentially needed to strip away all of the inessential stuff from the book, right? And this is because she was overthinking how much needed to be in the book, how much detail, how much stuff needed to be in the book, when the reality is that the win comes from a very, very sort of stripped down version, a fatless version, right? Now, effectively, to reframe that failure in a positive way, we need to think of it as data. So whenever you fail something and you need to fail as fast as you can, get that landing page up, call that business and get told to F off, right, and kill yourself, whatever, all these things, you need that data fast. And the only way you can get that data is not from videos, it's not from podcasts, it is from actually doing the work, right? We cannot win without the data. We cannot win without getting that information from the losses. Now, there is a perfectionism lie, right? And it is for idiots. So listen, labeling yourself, guys, as a perfectionist is self-sabotage, right? And you are a moron if you think you're a perfectionist. Perfectionism isn't some kind of like, it's not the virtue that you think it is. It's not like the cool thing you think it is. Oh, I'm such a perfectionist. It sounds to me like you do fucking nothing. It sounds like you do nothing, right? Because people who say they're perfectionists, I don't see them doing a lot. I don't see them doing a whole lot, right? So a 2021 meta-analysis in this publication called Psychological Bulletin, they linked perfectionism to burnout, anxiety, and lack of sort of creativity, right? So if that's you, you're telling me you're a perfectionist, I'm going to assume you ain't done a lot in the last couple of weeks, because you're just telling me that you're a perfectionist and you're sort of virtue signaling that you're this like guy who needs everything to be like, do some work, Now, there's a psychologist, Brene Brown, who highlighted that perfectionism correlates with shame avoidance. So again, we're going back to the fact that you do not want to do stuff in fear of something going wrong and then you looking like a moron. But guess what? No one has to know about this shit, man. You need to stop telling people what you're doing, because if it goes wrong, then you have to tell everyone that it's not going right? The last 3 businesses I've started, I didn't say a damn word to anyone until I had 3,000 in revenue or 10,000 in revenue or 100 customers, because no one needs to know about this shit. So you are trying to avoid shame because you've prepared everyone for you to win or lose. Just shut up. Just don't tell people about it except your closest friends. Even then, man, I don't know. It's a shield, not a sword. So shame avoidance is a shield, not a sword. In other words, you're not a perfectionist. You just don't want to make mistakes, which is really loserish. You need to make mistakes, guys, because that's where the really good data comes from. You're not going to get that data anywhere else. Make as many mistakes as you possibly can. Understanding that perfection is a red herring. You'll chase perfection and be happy with this constant loop of no. The only worthy pursuit is actually doing the work, because that's where the data comes from. Data does not come from looking at your work and thinking, oh God, it's not perfect. Of course it's not perfect. No one ever in the history of business has run a perfect business, right? And if they waited for it to be perfect, they should be sat on the sideline, twiddling their thumbs and scratching their head. So the actionable fix, right, is if you really cannot get the work done, one thing that I do is I create some kind of boundary to improve what I did yesterday on a tiny scale, right? So the 1% rule from James Clear talks about improving 1% daily, right? So this can be, for example, 2 extra minutes of a long run that you're on, like an extra piano exercise, another outreach message. If you sent 20 yesterday, send 23 today, or send 21 even, right? If you have written a couple of files in your code base because you're building a software, add another one on top of this, or reach out to more people, or post your startup on another, another sort of directory site, anything like that. Yesterday needs to be slightly better than the day before and the day before and the day before. And this means that the thought of it is not scary. 1% is easy, guys. It's another 30 minutes. It's another 30 seconds even of a long run. It's another piano exercise that takes another 2 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Whatever you can do to track that, you're challenging yourself more every day, then you can do it. And that is obviously Apple Notes, man. Like, I keep saying Apple Notes, but it's just simple, Now, the osmosis of skill, right? This is the most important part of the video, and it's so true, right? It's so important that you guys get this. Skill is not built through the planning of the thing that you're doing. It's actually forged through the exposure. Now listen, every hour spent doing the work rewires your brain, even if progress, listen to this, even if progress feels invisible. So in other words, doing stuff over and over again and you still feel like you're shit at it, you are actually not. It's physically impossible. People say, like, oh, perfect practice makes Bro, what did I say earlier? Perfectionism. Like, the word perfect is awful. I hate it because it's just people throwing shit around. Perfect practice makes perfect. No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. Like, you're doing stuff over and over again, like playing the piano, and it might be 3 months before you see even a glimpse of possibility that you're any good at it, right? But you are. It feels like shouting into the ether. It feels like you're shouting into like a pillow or something, right? With no end in sight, and you still suck at what you're doing months after or years after doing it. You actually aren't. You are being exposed to information and exposed to context through osmosis of just doing the task. Now, a scientific insight, neuroplasticity studies show that deliberate practice, this is Anders Ericsson, creates myelin, which is the insulation that speeds up neural signals. So basically, guys, I know that's a bit wordy, doing stuff makes you better at it, even if you feel like you're not progressing, right? So musicians don't achieve mastery through theory alone, but through relentless repetition of the stuff they perform. And if someone comes in your fucking ear and is like, no, you're not practicing in a perfect way, so you'll never be shut up. Shut up. Like, what are you doing? You're just shouting in my ear. What are you doing? Like, shouldn't you be doing stuff, or you just like yapping in my ear like a little dog? No. We are going to do stuff knowing that we suck ass at it, because you get progressively better the more you do it. And the worst thing you can possibly do, I know that Andrew Huberman talked about this, when you are about to give up, that is when that myelin is about to be like created, right? If you are on the verge of giving up on something, I'm fucking begging you not to. Because if you don't, there's a possibility that things will suddenly become better, because they will, right? And a philosophical insight is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which explains that beginners overestimate their competence while experts underestimate theirs, right? So mastery, guys, requires humbling yourself to the learning curve. And you know way more than you think. If I held a gun to your head and said, explain this to me, which could be your skill. It could be football, it could be basketball, it could be piano, it could be the drums, it could be coding, it could be creating YouTube videos. You would not be able to stop talking because you know so much. But you are now running around trying to chase this red herring that doesn't exist, which is perfection, and that's why you like get stuck and don't want to work. Now, Neil Gaiman's advice is to write the next sentence. So he's an author, of like fantasy books. One tiny action creates the momentum, and it doesn't require genius, right? Just drive. Not even that much drive, because writing a single sentence is very easy, guys. I'm not asking you for a whole book. I'm asking you for the next sentence. And once you have that next sentence, it's very unlikely that you're going to stop. The fallacy of the heroic first step, right? So I'm going to talk about the Zeigarnik effect here. We romanticize grand actions and these giant leaps, but momentum actually comes from micro actions, right? So the psychological insight here is that the Zeigarnik effect explains why unfinished tasks haunt us and how we can use this to our advantage for building our startup or coding or learning the piano, right? Starting a tiny task, so like writing one sentence tricks your brain into craving that closure, right? So you feel momentum. If you go on and you play a few chords of the piano, you are going to want to play more, right? And you just have to actually get there, right? This is what James Clear talks about. Start with the tiniest thing. Like if you need to make your bed or clean your bed or put your bed in the washer, you need to just take off one sheet, because no one in their right mind, unless you are insane, is going to take off one sheet and then just give up. Like the Zeigarnik effect will tell you that you need to carry on to complete that feedback loop, right? So starting a tiny task tricks your brain into craving the closure. And this is why starting something tiny, like vacuuming a single room, creates momentum that ends up with the entire house clean. Because you can trick your brain into craving that continuation and completion of the work. Now, Kierkegaard talks about the leap of faith, right? And it's not about certainty. No one who does a leap of faith, like a heroic mission, no one who takes that leap of faith knows everything about it and knows the outcome. They act despite not knowing. And that's how you win, right? Now, the actionable fix for this, like I said, is to use the Atomic Habits framework. So James Clear talked about these 2-minute tasks that are so easy to tick off, right? But you need to make them like a checklist, because ticking the things off is very important. I'll explain why now. When you break work into these tiny little tasks, like open my laptop, ticking off the small tasks induces dopamine that requires me to go on to the next task, right? I might have a code task that is as simple as change the headline on the website. Now, doing that takes 3 seconds, but that fuels the next task, and then dopamine stacks up. And before I know it, I've completed 18 goddamn tasks, right? Now, this is the thing. Another sort of part of this is about accountability, right? So isolation fuels procrastination. So basically, if you have an accountability partner of some sort, it increases task completion rates by 65%. The person who does this for me is my brother, right? So my brother he works extremely hard. He has his own YouTube channel that's very successful. I'm getting into YouTube now. I basically feed off the energy that he gives me, because if I don't have anyone to be accountable for, then I will be a fucking loser, right? Now, the modern example is that you've got mastermind groups and things like that, like Discord channels or Slack channels. I'm going to be creating one soon, like on like WAP or whatever, or School or WAP or, Discord, whatever it may be, right? Because it fosters accountability. There are hundreds of these. Comment on my damn video. Just say, this is what I'm building. And I will reach back out to you in a week and ask you where you are at with it, right? People care about your progress as much as your own, right? Sometimes they care more because people want to see you win. And some people, guys, if they can't win themselves because they don't have they're not made of the right stuff, and that's fine. They achieve things vicariously through you. So that's why football fans say oh, we won. It's like, did you? The team won, man. Like you're not Ronaldo, bro. Like you might feel part of the victory because it's communitarian. You are the part of the community that won, and that's why you say we won, right? It's the same thing. You need to find a small group of people. You've got to make sure they're doing a similar thing. My brother is building a business. I am building a business. I would not talk to a friend who was not building a business. Similar to how if you are playing the piano, do not talk to someone who's not playing the piano, because they are not going to understand the strife, the difficulty, the emotional stress of trying to become amazing at something if they don't understand it. Have you ever tried to talk to someone who doesn't get you? You're like, oh, this is bothering me this week. What do you think? What do you think? They're like, no, they're just empty. You've got to talk to people who are in the same boat and in the arena. Now, embracing the arena, right? Theodore Roosevelt, Man in the Arena speech, which I beg that you look it up. I'm not going to read it out now like some nerd, right? Reminds us that critics do not matter. Only those who are in the arena, right? Whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, right? We ain't going to get sweaty doing some code or learning the piano, right? But if you're saying oh, no, it doesn't apply to me because it's not physical hard work, then you're a moron. Of course it's hard work and of course it matters. If you have spent 12 hours learning a piece on the piano, and no one can see that, and people call you stupid, or people say what a waste of time that is, that's because they are not in the arena. You are in the arena, and all that matters is you and other people in the arena that you can connect with and hold accountable. The final takeaways. You're not a perfectionist, you're a moron, right? So you are a human avoiding vulnerability, because 15,000 years ago, you were a moron if you messed up some hunt, right, and didn't bring meat back, right? You're a loser who doesn't want to make mistakes, and that's okay. I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying that that's what people are. Skill is osmotic, right? So exposure beats preparation. So just get stuck in and get involved in the work and you'll get better at it, right? Even if you think you're not getting better at it, my revenue's not going up, my this, that, and the other. Failure is statistical, right? So each attempt increases your luck surface area. So you notice there's some people who just get lucky all the time. It's because they're constantly doing stuff. Doing stuff actually increases your luck surface area. So a stupid example I don't really like, because I don't, pickup culture and all that kind of thing, right? You've got 1,000 women in a room. You might think that your friend is amazing at getting women, but it's because he's approached and then solicited 26 women in one night. There are dudes like that, man. There are crazy guys who are like, I'll just do it, right? And then at the end of the night, everyone goes, oh, look at him go, man. Like, look at him go. The dude has asked like 40 women. Like that's increasing your luck surface area. It's the same with cold emails. Sending 15,000 emails a day is going to increase your luck surface area over someone who's sending 5. And someone who's sending 5 is going to be in your ear. Oh, how did you get so many meetings? You're lucky. Lucky? I don't know about that. The work you avoid, it's forging you. As you move, as you continue to avoid the work, you're becoming more of a loser, right? So start small with a little checklist, but start messy. And it's fun when things are messy, right? In this sort of world of starting something and becoming better at it, it is hilarious because you suck at it. And all of this world, this like sort of cavernous, like amazing world is just opening up. And you're like, oh, wow, like I'm learning a load of stuff and it's coming quick. Now, as you start to walk on the way appears, right? And that's what Rumi said. So that's what I urge you guys to do is to start, right? Now, further reading, Atomic Habits, Daring Greatly, The War of Art, Grit. The world needs your work, guys. And don't read all this. Don't read these yet, right? Just start doing some stuff and then come back to me when you've actually done some stuff and then we can talk.